The applause should have felt like victory. Instead, it sounded like static, so I scanned the auditorium one last time. My eyes searched for faces that never appeared. Rows of strangers. Proud parents. Crying siblings. Empty seats where my family should have been. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a split second, hope flared, until I saw it was a photo from my aunt's social media and my mother was laughing at my brother's backyard party. The timestamp matched the exact moment I was crossing the stage. That's when I knew. Some absences aren't accidents. They're choices. Graduation day arrived wrapped in both hope and dread. Emotions I'd learned to carry together like mismatched luggage. That morning, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, adjusting my cap for the 10th time, practicing the smile I'd wear when my family finally saw what 8 years of sacrifice had built. The black gown felt heavier than it should have, resting on my shoulders like a physical record of every late night, every skipped meal, every moment I chose ambition over comfort. My phone sat on the bathroom counter, silent as a tombstone. I'd sent reminders for weeks. The date, the time, the venue, even the exact row numbers where their tickets were assigned. The last message from my mother glowed on the screen, sent the night before. "We're so busy getting everything ready for today. Don't stress, okay?" Smiley face. A heart that I reread it over and over, filling in the blanks with the only explanation that made sense. They were preparing for my big day. What else could everything mean? Outside the venue, families clustered together like bouquets of joy. Flowers in hand, homemade signs waving, laughter spilling down the stone steps. I stood apart, refreshing my messages again and again, as if checking hard enough could summon a response. "Nothing," I typed. "Where are you guys sitting?" My thumb hovered over the send button, trembling. Then I deleted it. I'd spent too long trying to be the daughter who never asked for too much. Neediness felt like weakness, and I trained myself to survive without expectations. Inside the auditorium, I took my seat among the graduating class, surrounded by whispered excitement and the soft rustle of programs being passed along. The dean welcomed families who had traveled from distant cities and small towns to witness this milestone. I scanned the crowd methodically, pairing every empty seat with an excuse that protected my family from blame: traffic, parking issues, bathroom emergencies. Anything but the truth. Then my phone buzzed. Not a text. A notification my aunt had posted to social media, tagging my mother, hidden beneath my gown. My hands shook as the image loaded. There was my younger brother Ryan, standing in our backyard under a plastic congrats grad banner. He wasn't graduating, it was just a party. My mother stood beside him, plate in hand, head thrown back in laughter. The timestamp stared back at me, confirming what I didn't want to believe. This photo was taken at the exact moment my name was about to be called. The applause in the auditorium dissolved into white noise. My vision narrowed until there was only me and that image, the evidence of a choice so deliberate it felt like violence. When my name echoed through the speakers, Katherine Miller, my body stood before my mind could catch up. I crossed the stage on autopilot. The handshake, the diploma, the camera flashed. It all happened to someone else. I smiled, because that's what you do when you're performing for an audience that includes everyone except the people who matter. So I walked back to my seat, clutching a diploma that suddenly felt less like a reward and more like a receipt, proof that I had honored a commitment alone. I made a decision. Not the hot, reckless kind born from anger. Something colder. Sharper. If my family could choose a backyard barbecue over the culmination of my life's work, then I could choose to stop waiting for them to notice I existed. Those empty seats weren't a mistake. They were a message. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to send one back. The ceremony ended the way it was supposed to. Cheers erupting, graduates spilling onto the lawn in a chaotic wave of relief and joy. Mortarboards flew into the air. Parents cried. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped with pride. I stood at the edge of it all, and my diploma case was pressed against my chest like armor. Not something to celebrate, but something to protect myself with. Around me, families collided in tearful embraces, the celebration I had imagined 1,000 times unfolding for everyone except me. My phone felt like a grenade in my pocket. I pulled it out, stared at my mother's name, and pressed call, straight to voicemail. Her voice was cheerful and rehearsed, the same one she used for strangers and telemarketers. "Hi, you've reached Linda. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up and called again. Because surely there was an explanation. Surely this wasn't what it looked like. This time someone answered. But it wasn't her voice I heard first. It was music. Laughter. The clatter of plates. The unmistakable sizzle of a grill. Then my mother's voice. Distant but unmistakable. Hold on, everyone, I need a picture of the guest of honor. The guest of honor. Not me. Never me. I ended the call before she realized she'd picked up, before I had to hear her surprise. Or worse, her excuses. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick had cracked at the corners from smiling too hard. My eyes looked hollow, like something had been scooped out of me and never replaced. I waited for anger to arrive. It didn't. Instead, something colder settled in. Clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad timing or poor communication. It was a pattern I had been stitching excuses over for years, bending reality to protect people who never once asked if I needed them. I drove back to my apartment in silence, the city blurring past my windows. When I got inside, I opened my laptop and started a list. Not a dramatic manifesto, just logistics. Close out lease. Transfer savings. Apply to jobs in other cities. Remove family from emergency contacts. The words looked strange on the screen, like a language I was only just learning to speak. But with each line I felt lighter, like I was finally taking off a costume I'd been forced to wear for someone else's comfort. Then I thought of Emma Torres. The friend who stayed up with me on video calls during finals week. The one who sent care packages when I was too broke to eat anything but ramen. The one who never once treated my achievements like they were optional. I opened our chat and typed, "I'm serious this time. I'm done. I need a clean break. Is San Francisco still as far away as it sounds?" Her reply came within 60 seconds. "And you have a couch here until you find something better. If you're really doing this, we'll make it work." I looked around my apartment. The textbooks stacked like monuments to effort, the cheap furniture I'd assembled alone, the framed photo of my family from 3 years ago. My mother's smile in that picture suddenly looked rehearsed, like she was posing for someone else's camera. I took the frame off my desk, removed the photo, dropped it in the trash. Not with anger, with finality. That night I packed what could fit in my car. Clothes, my laptop, the few things that felt like mine rather than remnants of a life I was supposed to want. I slid my apartment key under my landlord's door with a note. Moving for work. Apologies for the short notice. Then I sent my mother one message, a photo of me in my cap and gown, standing alone in the empty auditorium after everyone had left. No caption. No explanation. Just the truth she hadn't bothered to witness. I muted her number, placed my phone face down on the passenger seat, and turned the key in the ignition, driving toward a future that didn't ask me to beg for a seat in the audience. San Francisco greeted me with fog and possibility. The air was cold and damp when I arrived, the city stretching out in every direction, vibrant, indifferent, alive in a way Boston had never been for me. Here no one knew my history. No one knew who I was supposed to be. The anonymity felt like freedom. Emma met me outside her apartment building just as the sun was coming up, barefoot in mismatched socks, her arms open before I'd even fully parked. "You actually did it," she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than casual. "You really left. What was I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice catching despite myself. Wait around for her to remember I exist. Emma didn't argue. She didn't offer platitudes about family being everything or promises that time heals all wounds. She just grabbed a box from my trunk and led me upstairs to a corner of her living room she'd cleared out. Lamp plugged in, blanket folded neatly on the couch. Home. For now. Or maybe the first real home I'd ever chosen for myself. The first week passed in a blur of logistics. I applied for jobs during the day, rewriting my life on paper one form at a time. Tech startups, urban planning firms, positions that felt just out of reach but worth trying for. Emergency contact, Emma Torres. Next of kin, not applicable. Permanent address, San Francisco, California. Every line that used to belong to my mother became a small act of erasure. My pen hovered over spaces where I'd once written Linda Miller, and when I crossed her name out, I felt something close to satisfaction. If she wasn't going to show up when I needed her, She didn't get to be the person hospitals called if I ended up in trouble. Interviews came and went. Rejections stacked up in my inbox like receipts for a life I was still learning how to afford. But 3 weeks in, a mid-sized startup building tools for urban planning extended an offer. When the recruiter said, "We'd like to bring you on board," I almost asked if she was sure she had the right person. The salary was modest. The office was cramped, but the job was mine. Entirely, undeniably mine. Work, small talk became a minefield. "Where are you from? What brought you here? Do you miss your family?" I perfected the art of the polite deflection. "Boston. Needed a change. It's complicated back home." Most people nodded and moved on. Few pressed. I learned how to smile in a way that gently closed doors. Tonight, I sat on Emma's couch scrolling through my phone, and I started deleting photos. At first, the easy ones. Blurry selfies, duplicates, screenshots I didn't need. Then I moved on to the images that hurt. My mother hugging Ryan at his birthday while I stood in the background. My mother cheering at his games. My mother smiling in the front row of his milestones. Meanwhile, my own achievements lived in bathroom mirror selfies, proof that I'd been there. Even when no one else was. One by one, I removed them, not in a burst of anger. With surgical precision, I curated my life, leaving behind late-night coffee runs during finals, projects I was proud of, my new city glowing at sunset. I erased her not because I wanted to pretend she never existed, but because I refused to keep preserving a version of her that had never truly shown up for me. I kept one photo, my grandmother and me on her porch, her arm looped through mine, both of us squinting into the sun. She was the only person who had ever looked at me like I was enough. Exactly as I was. I slid the photo into the corner of my mirror, a reminder of the love I had once known. And the love I was learning to give myself. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Halfway through a product sprint at work. Subject: Estate of Margaret Hayes. My grandmother's name. My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to her in months, telling myself I was protecting her from the fallout of my disappearance. That distance had felt responsible at the time. Kind even. The truth was uglier. I'd been afraid she would take my mother's side. Afraid she'd tell me to go back, to be reasonable, to smooth things over the way women in my family always had. I opened the email with trembling fingers. The lawyer explained that my grandmother had passed away peacefully 2 weeks earlier. There would be a small service in Boston. Attached were scanned documents, her will, a handwritten note addressed to me, and details of an education fund she'd established years ago, specifically for my tuition and graduation expenses. I opened the statement. Most of the money was gone. The withdrawals were marked with dates that felt too familiar, dates that lined up perfectly with my brother's so-called emergencies. Car repairs. Failed business venture. A last-minute trip he needed to take with friends. My throat went dry. My grandmother had trusted my mother to manage that fund. And my mother had treated it like a personal item, for Ryan's convenience. Then I found the note. It was dated months before my graduation, written to the lawyer in my grandmother's careful handwriting. Linda mentioned Katherine doesn't want a big fuss over her ceremony and prefers a small family dinner later. My vision blurred. My mother hadn't just skipped my graduation. She'd rewritten the story so completely that even my grandmother believed I didn't want anyone there. How many times had she done this? How many moments had she quietly edited, replacing my needs with someone else's while convincing everyone that I was the kind of person who didn't make a big deal out of things? I booked a flight to Boston that night. Not to reconcile. Not to repair anything. I was going back to bury my grandmother. And to bury whatever remained of the daughter my mother thought she could control. The funeral was small and quiet. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, clutching the program, watching my mother from across the crowd. Her eyes were red. One hand gripped the back of a folding chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a moment, instinct kicked in. The familiar pull, the urge to go to her to fix things, to make her grief easier. Then I remembered the empty seats. The backyard party photo. The ache hardened into something solid. After the burial, everyone gathered at my grandmother's house. The living room filled with relatives balancing paper plates, trading stories about how strong my mother had been. "She's had such a hard year," one aunt said. "Between Ryan's setbacks and Katherine going wherever she went." Another voice chimed in. Linda said Kathy didn't even want a ceremony. Can you imagine? My ears rang that I stepped into the doorway. That's not what happened. The room went still. Then my mother turned, her smile faltering. Kathy, she said carefully, this really isn't the time. Isn't it? I asked. I took a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Grandma spent years saving for my education and my graduation. She trusted you to manage that money. She thought you were supporting me. She thought I didn't want anyone at my ceremony because that's what you told her. A murmur rippled through the room. My aunt's eyes widened. My mother's face drained of color. You're misinterpreting. I pulled the printed documents from my bag and placed them on the coffee table. These are Grandma's instructions, I said, then I flipped the page. And these are the withdrawals, on the same dates you posted photos from Ryan's emergency trips and parties. The silence was absolute. For once, there was nothing for her to rewrite. Nothing left for me to explain. I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't ask for accountability. I simply turned and walked out of the house my grandmother had built with love my mother never learned how to give evenly. Outside, the air felt cleaner. Grief still hurt. Loss still mattered. But for the first time, the truth was no longer mine to carry alone. I reached for the remote and turned on the TV. I'd synced my phone to it earlier, just in case I found the courage for exactly this moment. The screen flickered, then a slideshow began. First, a photo of me in my cap and gown, standing alone on an empty stage. Then the next image appeared, the backyard barbecue from that same afternoon. My mother smiling beside Ryan, laughing under a plastic congrats grad banner. I didn't add music, the silence was loud enough. While I was walking across that stage alone, I said evenly, this is what my mother was doing. No one spoke. She told Grandma I didn't want her there, I continued. She told all of you that too, didn't she? I let the question sit in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Then my uncle cleared his throat. Linda, he said slowly, is that true? My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a laugh that sounded brittle, thin. This is ridiculous, she said. You know how dramatic Kathy can be. Left. She didn't even tell us she was moving to San Francisco. What were we supposed to do? Show up, I said. That's what parents do. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And if you couldn't, I added, you could have told the truth instead of turning me into the ungrateful daughter who didn't want a fuss. I turned then, not just to her but to the room. I disappeared because staying meant letting her keep rewriting my life, using my story as a prop for hers. I erased her from my paperwork, my forms, my photos, because she erased me first. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ryan shifted in his chair, staring at the floor. My aunt looked down at the documents on the coffee table. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the realization spreading, the money, the lies, the pattern. The difference between the mother they thought they knew and the one who had quietly chosen a party over her daughter's graduation. My mother's voice cracked. You don't understand what it's like to hold everything together, she said. I did what I had to do for this family. Did you? Yes. Or did you just do what made you feel important? I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim folder. Here's what I'm doing for myself now. I opened it and laid the papers on the table. These forms remove you as my emergency contact, as my beneficiary, as my point of contact for anything involving my life. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. I've already filed paperwork in San Francisco to change my last name to Grandma's maiden name, I continued. After today, legally and emotionally, we're done. Someone dropped a plastic cup. It hit the floor and rolled, loud in the quiet. Damn, my mother whispered. Is this revenge? Maybe, I said softly. But it's also protection. I met her eyes for the first time. I'm not going to keep bleeding for someone who calls my dreams just another day. Her face crumpled, not all at once but slowly. I saw the moment it landed. The moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. There would be no late-night call where I apologized for being too sensitive. No quiet return where I smoothed things over and made it easier for her to forget. I was already gone. This was just the part where I stopped pretending otherwise. I turned off the TV, gathered my folder, walked toward the door. The threshold, I stopped and looked back one last time. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. "I hope someday, when you're wondering why your daughter doesn't call, you remember that you were the one who taught me how to disappear." Then I stepped outside. And for the first time in my life, I didn't erase myself to make room for anyone else. Back in San Francisco, everything looked the same. Same bus stop, same corner coffee shop, same dent in Emma's couch cushion. But I was different. The funeral, the confrontation, the slideshow, it all replayed in my mind like a movie I'd finally reached the end of. For the first time, there wasn't a scene I wished I could redo. The name change paperwork took months to process. But filing it felt like flipping a switch. I signed the forms with a steady hand. Katherine Hayes, my grandmother's last name. The first time I saw it printed on an official document, grief and pride tangled together in a way I hadn't expected. I went through my phone, removing my mother from every corner of my life. Rideshare accounts, char files, trusted contacts, emails, notifications. Anything from her went straight into a folder labeled archive. Muted, out of reach. Erasing her wasn't a single dramatic gesture. It was hundreds of small, deliberate choices. Name by name, form by form, memory by memory. One night, Emma found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by shoeboxes of old photos and notebooks. "You sure you're okay?" she asked. "I'm not burning anything," I said. "I'm just sorting." I made 2 piles. Pile 1. Moments that still felt like mine. Laughing with friends, school projects, the time Grandma and I baked a cake so badly it collapsed and we ate it straight from the pan. Pile 2. Moments that reminded me I'd been an accessory in my own life. Standing behind Ryan in family photos. Sitting off to the side while my mother poured herself into his latest crisis. I taped the second pile shut and slid it to the back of my closet. Not destroyed. Just out of reach. "Do you ever worry you're going to regret this?" Emma asked quietly. "Every day," I admitted. "But I also regret every time I waited for her to change. At some point, you have to choose which regrets you can live with." Weeks turned into months. Real life, ordinary, complicated, beautiful life, started filling the spaces anger used to occupy. Work got busier. I led my first project. I laughed more easily. Sometimes a whole day passed without my mother crossing my mind at all. Then one afternoon an email slipped past my filters. Subject line: just my name. It was from her. No greeting. No apologies. Just a few lines. She'd heard about the name change. She said the family was concerned. She hoped I would come to my senses and remember where you belong. I hit reply. Typed 1 sentence. "I remember exactly where I belong, and it isn't where I'm treated like I don't exist." And then I deleted it. Some messages don't need to be delivered to be true. I looked around Emma's apartment. The city hummed beyond the windows. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had space to exist entirely for myself. Unapologetically, without editing. And it was enough.